I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. Pleased to have you on with us today. We're on a little early. We've got a two-part program. The first part is with Speaker of the House for the Minnesota State Legislature, Representative Melissa Hortman. She's a DFLer from District 36B. She lives in Brooklyn Park. Her area of service includes that community and parts of Hennepin County. Representative Speaker, Madam Speaker, good morning, first of all. How are you? Maybe we don't have the link yet.
I am wondering if you can hear me.
I hear you now, and I see you as well. Thank you.
Great. Good morning.
Good morning, and so good to see you, and thank you so much for being on the program. We've got about 20 minutes for this segment of the program, so thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to connect with us. And first of all, let's tell people about your duties as Speaker of the House. It's an awesomely important responsibility that you have. Share with us what that means.
You know, it's really quite an honor to serve as Speaker. In a way, I feel like I'm the coach for the team, the DFL members in the Minnesota House, but also I have a role that's kind of nonpartisan in terms of directing the Minnesota House of Representatives. So as the leader of the DFLers, it's my job to get our agenda across the finish line, successfully negotiate with the Senate, and then get bills to the governor's desk. And what we really are focused on is improving Minnesotans' lives. And so I manage workflow that comes up from the members. So members bring things that their constituents have inspired them to do, and they do the hard work, and then I shepherd the bills across the finish line.
The current times are particularly difficult, I think challenging, unique number of words would describe them. But we've got the coronavirus pandemic. We've got the question of the impact on the economy of the state and of the country, the hope that may arise out of the federal government passing the $1.9 trillion emergency relief bill. But you also have the pressures created by what I call the George Floyd social justice energy boiling up in Minnesota and around the country. And you got the governor and executive team with emergency powers to run the state, which makes your job different from what it might normally be. Talk about how all that works for you right now.
Well, I think like every other person in the country and the world, it's been a pretty stressful time since COVID struck, right? Just about a year ago, we all started to get ready to leave our workplaces, not knowing when we would go back, and me included. And, you know, in the immediate early months of last year, March, April, May, we had to kind of totally transform the legislature from an in-person institution to an online institution and get it functioning well. And just as we accomplished that, we saw George Floyd die at the knee of Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis. And as you know, unleashed 4 days in Minnesota that none of us will ever forget.
Right.
And as the Speaker of the House, I felt really powerless. You know, I was on the phone with folks at 2:30 in the morning who wanted to get a fire truck to a fire near a gas station before it got to tanks. And as you know, those were really treacherous times. So I felt a very strong burden in the summer of 2020 that we needed to move on police reform and accountability right away. We needed to make sure that people knew we heard their voices and we cared about this issue and we were going to take action and that people raising their voices had an impact. So it was very important to me that given the thousands of people who showed up in the streets here and around the world, that we took action. And so probably the most stressful 30 days of my life was between the June 20th special session and the July 20th special session, where we put that police reform and accountability bill together. And I have to say, Representative Rena Moran from St. Paul and Representative Carlos Mariani were really the stars of that effort. You know, they worked 24/7 to engage community and to put together a bill that was worthy of the moment. And I was so impressed by Rena. I made her the chair of Ways and Means. So
remind us of the highlights of the bill.
Sure. We banned chokeholds,
Hmm.
changed the standard for the use of deadly force. We changed the way that the disciplinary process works for police officers. We spent quite a bit of time trying to make sure that there were more community voices at the table. So we put more community members on the post board, and then we created a citizens council at the post board to drive change in policing. You know, Representative Carlos Mariani feels very strongly we have this state licensing board for police officers, but yet they cannot take the licenses of officers. And so often the discipline is in the local police departments. And with the lack of transparency, people feel there's not really accountability for officers. So moving more accountability at the post board wasn't a key important first step. There's so much more work to do, but we had to take what we could get with the Republican Senate and working with folks in law enforcement who understand that their profession has to change in order to have the trust of the community. And they can't be safe if they don't have the trust of the community. And it's very, very clear that the community is not safe and with the way we currently practice policing.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. My guest is Representative and Speaker of the House, Melissa Hortman. She represents the Brooklyn Park and parts of Minneapolis, Hennepin County area in the legislature, but she's leading the legislature right now. Melissa, let me ask you how you felt when, say, last year, I think we had protests at the state capitol where armed people showed up. Thank God, no incidences there, but it kind of presaged the things that happened in Washington, D.C. and in Michigan. So what's been your thought about that entire process of armed, quote unquote, insurrectionists, potentially insurrectionists, on the campus of our state capitol, on the campuses of capitals like Michigan, and then the penultimate experience of recent at the Capitol in Washington, D.C. What were your feelings? What were your thoughts as you watched these things in succession unfurl?
Well, just total disbelief, right? That we're at a stage in our country where we have armed folks who think that they can take the U.S. Capitol by storm. And then that day and in the days following, not knowing really what's coming next. How many more people are there like this? And are they going to engage in these efforts at individual capitals? So, you know, our law enforcement community was prepared for anything that would happen at the Minnesota State Capitol, in large part because coming out of, you know, the incidents we had at the end of May, they went to unified command. And so, you know, I think many of us were concerned about the Minneapolis Police Department's response. And so, as you know, there were jurisdictions all over the state that got engaged. And they have been working together consistently since then. So when we had that January 6th storm the Capitol rally at the Minnesota State Capitol, the Department of Public Safety Commissioner John Harrington was ready, and the state troopers were ready, and they had a very strong show of force, which they had throughout really the summer, because we did have quite a credible threat on the Minnesota State Capitol on May 29th. But we have got to change the way that we deal with each other as a country. I think it's been 4 years of people not treating each other respectfully, and a just degradation in our public discourse that has resulted in people having really no boundaries, no social norms that they used to observe. Things that were unthinkable have become thinkable. And so I think it starts with the smallest of respect, treating everyone with respect and dignity and kindness, to get back to a state and a country where nobody would think of doing something so crazy as to try to take a state capitol or a U.S. capitol with firearms.
But some in my community and profession would say that those feelings that have surfaced have always been there, and that they've been baked in, they're hardwired into the culture, that our culture emerged out of a system of legalized disadvantaging of people based on race, ethnicity. Slavery was written into our Constitution, and we've been fighting, I think, as a people, as a nation, as a world, to undo or to correct that unfortunate experience. And so there are people who maybe feel that the privileges they had or think they have or seek are threatened by continued enfranchisement and development of other, whoever the other is, could be Black, could be Asian, Latino. Uh, and so are we really at a point where where we're coming to reckon with those attitudes, those understandings of what it is to be a human being and what it means in the context of the democracy that we cherish so deeply, and in the context of the world we must create that cherishes every human being? What do you think about that?
Well, at the Minnesota House, under my leadership, we're trying to really seriously reckon with the question of what does it mean to be an anti-racist institution? It's not enough not to be racist because, as you laid out, the system has racism baked in. You know, at the state capitol, when I walk the halls, there's portraits of dead white men staring back at me. And the things that happen in this state and in this country were not accomplished by dead white men alone, right? There's a whole side of the story that's not being told. And as we look at our institutions that were created by the white male patriarchy, we have to take them apart before we can truly be an anti-racist society. So, you know, under the leadership of Representative Ruth Richardson, we passed a resolution last summer declaring racism as a public health crisis in the Minnesota House of Representatives. And we established a select committee on racial justice. And Representative Rena Moran and Representative Ruth Richardson co-chaired that committee, that select committee. They did a ton of work in the fall and have produced a report and have called for a significant investment and significant changes in policy, not to just improve equity, but to help to begin to dismantle a system that has structural racism baked in.
How are we doing? I'll switch gears a little bit and have you speak about COVID-19 in Minnesota. From my point of view as a communicator, I have both praise and applause for the leadership at the state for being proactive, I think aggressive, and intentional in both delivering and articulating an intent to have equity kind of be one of the guiding forces in how we respond to COVID-19. That's how it seems to me. How does it look from your point of view?
Well, you know, people have given House members a really hard time for letting the governor continue to have these emergency powers for this full year. But we have faith and we believe in Governor Tim Walz's response to this pandemic. As you note, he has taken life-saving actions. I mean, things like the mask mandate, shutting down bars and restaurants. He really reduced the quantity of deaths that we would have seen in Minnesota if we hadn't have taken those measures. And he needed those emergency powers to take those measures and save lives and do all that work that he's doing across the spectrum of responding to COVID-19, including looking at the equity pieces. And I would say that members of the legislature in the DFL side have really pushed the administration, starting way back in March and April of last year, to make sure that the Minnesota Department of Health was very focused on the inequitable way that COVID-19 is impacting Minnesotans. It was evident right from the beginning that those who speak a different language customarily than English were not getting this information they needed as rapidly as they needed. You know, we had rampant spread in the Hmong community because there wasn't clear and decisive information about how to manage a Hmong funeral, a traditional Hmong funeral, early enough. So I think there's definitely a partnership between the legislature and the executive branch, but as fellow Democrats running the Minnesota House of Representatives, we have felt very secure and strong in supporting the governor's continued use of the emergency powers so that he can save lives and run the pandemic response as well as he has.
One of the budget opportunities right now, we're getting the prediction that there might be a surplus of 1.2, 1.7 billion, possibly?
1.6, yep.
Okay. So what's that mean for us if things hold up that way? And I think that's in part due to the federal support, right, that's put us in this position from the COVID-19 response. But what does that mean for us going forward? What kinds of things can we do differently or more of that budget will allow us to address?
Well, it's interesting because we had such a big swing. Like the picture for us as a state economically swung so much when we got the November budget forecast. We thought we had a $1.3 billion deficit. And so you're
Right.
thinking, Republicans are talking about cuts and Democrats were talking about raising revenue. And now with the $1.6 billion surplus and another federal bill on the horizon. So the last federal bill sent us $2.1 billion. This next federal bill could be sending us as much as $2.6 billion. And so then the question is exactly where do we make the investments to have the most difference? Generally, the House DFL caucus, the priorities that we've had in the past, I think will be probably consistent going forward, but we're shaping our agenda right now. All 70 members of the caucus are currently with the new forecast in hand, putting our priorities together. But traditionally, what we have really focused on is early childhood education opportunities. We need to address the opportunity gap in the E12 education system. There's just no excuse for Minnesota having the inequities that we do in our education system. So, my hope that would be that we're investing a substantial portion in the education arena. And one of the places is the Teachers of Color initiatives that various members have brought forward. We need to make it easy and accessible for people of color to get their master's, go into teaching, get their license, and become part of the team, because those kids, we've heard it from the children themselves. They really value seeing teachers who look like them. And we just, as a state, have got to do a better job at that.
In the last minute or so, Madam Speaker, talk about yourself. I've mentioned that you're from Brooklyn Park. You are an attorney, but talk about your own development, how you come to the work of the public service as an elected official. Talk about your family, if you would, and what poured into you from your heritage lineage to make you the fighter that you are.
Well, I grew up, blue collar family. My dad started a business, and both my mom and dad came from farm families, and they were very poor growing up. And then when my dad did well in his business as a Catholic, they really told me, to whom much is given, much is expected. So my parents always raised me to give back. And my first job out of law school, I was a legal aid lawyer. And I worked at the Housing Discrimination Law Project in the South Side office of the Legal Aid Society. And right out of law school, I couldn't imagine a better job. I got to sue racist, sexist landlords. I got to sue landlords that didn't accommodate disabilities. It was really rewarding work. And but the frustrating thing about being a legal aid lawyer is that my clients had problems that weren't just legal. They were problems that came from not having adequate educational opportunities, not having adequate economic opportunities. And I couldn't do anything about that as their lawyer. I maybe could prevent them from being evicted, or I could force their landlord to fix their heater or to exterminate the cockroaches, but I couldn't get them a good paying job or a fantastic educational opportunity that would transform their lives. And so the frustration of trying to help one client at a time got me looking at the state legislature, where we can make more systemic change and really get at those economic issues, those the broader societal issues of, creating more abundant, affordable housing, more educational opportunities. So for me, it's always been kind of in my blood, the concept of public service. And it's not a great way to make a lot of money, but fortunately, money's not important to me. Looking back and seeing that we made a difference in people's lives, that's what's rewarding to me.
Listen, we're out of time, but I have so much to ask you. Maybe you'll come back in the future and spend more time with me. I love people's personal stories, because I think that really shines a light on what drives us, to be passionate about our work, our vision. And I've enjoyed learning a little bit about you today. I hope we can do this again in the near future. I want to thank you for being here, Melissa Hortman. Thank you so much.
I'd love to. I hope to have lots of great things to talk about that we're doing at the legislature soon. So thank you, and I look forward to speaking again.
Thank you so much. I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Be back in a few minutes with another heart-to-heart conversation with Batala McFarlane on our project about heart health. Stay tuned. Bye-bye.